Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to Drawing Down the Stars. I'm Snappy, and thank you so much for joining me for part 6 of our reading of The Golden Ass, or Metamorphoses by Apuleius. This has been such a fun and crazy kind of wild read, so I'm really excited to dig back into it and explore the text with you all. So let's start by doing a bit of a recap. So we've been following our man Apuleius now for a while, and Apuleius has found himself in a bandit lair, right? He got turned into a donkey, wound up getting turned into a pack mule by bandits who took him deep into this cave system where he's now hanging out with this young girl who was kidnapped, this old woman, and these bandits. And we heard all the stories of the bandits and their successes and their failures, trying to rob various people. And then we started to focus on the story of this young girl, right? The young girl who was kidnapped by these brigands. And she relayed to us a dream in her story. And in her dream, she saw a vision of her wedding. And we were told that she was marrying the man of her dreams and that her family approved and that everything was lining up perfectly, only for the brigands to show up and kidnap her. And then she had a vision of her husband chasing after the brigands, only to be killed because he wouldn't give up the pursuit. And now she's panicking and terrified, freaking out that the world is going to abandon her and that no one is going to come and rescue her. And it's in this moment that the old woman who lives with the brigands and feeds them decides to relay the story of Cupid and Psyche, this incredible myth. And it's been going on now for a while. We've been looking at this story, and it's been so interesting. So with Cupid and Psyche, we get the story of Psyche first. She's the most beautiful woman who ever lived, right? People find her as attractive as Aphrodite. The world can't handle her. People cry at her sight. They worship the ground she walks on. She can't have a regular relationship. Everyone is jealous of her, and she's become locked away in the palace of her father, miserable and heartbroken. And at this, Aphrodite is so jealous. How could another as beautiful as her exist? She relays how they just overcome that issue with the apple of discord and Eris, right? And she had won and proven herself to be the most beautiful, only to have another come and challenge her. But not a real challenge, just be born that way. This poor young Psyche, cursed by beauty, right? So the story continues, and Aphrodite asks her son Cupid to curse Psyche. Says, we want you to curse Psyche to fall in love with the most horrible being, husband imaginable, ruin her life. So Cupid agrees to go do this. And Psyche's family goes to the oracle, unsure of what to do with Psyche because she's so beautiful, it's becoming a problem. And they don't know how to help her or how to protect her, what to do. So they ask the oracle at Delphi, and the oracle tells them to take her up to the top of this mountain and to leave her there, to abandon her there. So they do. And while she's abandoned on the mountain, Cupid swoops down and he sees her. And he's so overwhelmed by her beauty and her presence, he can't bring himself to curse her. And instead, he cuts himself and falls madly in love with her. And it's at this point that he has his friend Zephyr the West Wind sweep her up into the clouds, into his magic palace. And she's trapped in this magical palace where she gets everything she could ever want. She has incredible, beautiful art, gold and silver all around, flowers, water. She gets these incredible baths. She has these mysterious voices that will attend on her every whim, but she can't see anything. And every night, her husband, a mysterious force, appears and makes love to her. And while she connects deeply with this force, he's only a disembodied voice, and she doesn't know him. And she has no connection to anyone, trapped in this golden palace, even though she has everything taken care of. She is lonely and desperate and alone. So she cries and she wants to connect to her two lost sisters. And she begs Cupid to allow her to see her sisters again. And at first, Cupid is reluctant. He doesn't want her to engage with these women. And he warns her that they will just be jealous of her. They won't understand the situation. And they will tell her that she must see Cupid. They must reveal who Cupid actually is. And this is a huge problem, because if she gazes on Cupid and they actually engage in that loving, intimate, full connection, then Aphrodite will know. So they're cursed to be in this separation. Eventually, though, Cupid relents to Psyche and agrees to allow her sisters to come. And they make message, and the sisters come to visit her on the island or on the mountain. And the winds come and they sweep her sisters up to this crystal palace, and they get to experience and see all of the wealth and power and luxury that she's living in. And they're immediately jealous and don't fully comprehend the situation. They immediately just assume that they have been cheated and that she has some great reward over them. And they immediately doubt her and call her and believe her to be a liar when she speaks about her husband and his mysterious story. And so when they leave their sister Psyche and they return back home, they conspire against her, and they become determined that they are going to unseat her from this wealth and from this love, because they want it for themselves. Oh, one of the things is Cupid had warned Psyche not to give her sisters any gold or wealth, but she did. And this is part of that reason why they were cursed by greed, right? So what ends up happening is time goes on again. And again, Psyche becomes lonely and begs Cupid to bring her sisters back. And the sisters come back again, but this time they are determined. They are determined to get their sister to figure out who Cupid is. And they lie to her. They tell her this wild story that people around the mountain, farmers, have seen a monster descend from the sky from the Crystal Palace. And they've seen this monstrous snake go off and hunt and consume people all around the mountain. And they said that she was cursed and that she's married to this monster and that her lover is truly this horrible, horrible snake. And they tell her that she has to kill the snake. And they give her a knife and say, light a lamp and reveal who your husband is. And then when he appears as the snake, slay him. So the next evening after her sisters leave, Psyche, just guilt-ridden and uncertain and just so stressed out by the loneliness of her situation. She can't continue in this situation as it is, having this mysterious lover that she can't connect to, having no one around her, just trapped alone in the Crystal Palace. So she decides she's going to listen to her sisters. And she lights a lamp, an oil lamp, in the middle of the night after they made love. And as soon as she lights the lamp, it's revealed to be Cupid. And she has the knife out, ready to kill him. But when she sees it's Cupid, she starts crying and breaking down, recognizing how wrong she was. But in a wild twist of fate, a drop of hot oil falls out of the lamp and burns Cupid severely on his shoulder, waking him up. And he sees Psyche standing over him, brandishing the knife. And he knows immediately what's this about. And they fight, and he freaks out. And he recognizes in this moment, too, that Aphrodite will now know because she has gazed upon him. So Cupid banishes her and says that she's pregnant with a child, but that child will now be immortal, and she's banished to the earth. And he says that he is going to punish her sisters for the crimes that they inflicted upon them. And at the same time, Aphrodite gets a message from the winds and then from the seagulls that tell her what's going on, that Cupid never actually cursed Psyche and that he has fallen in love with Psyche. So what happens next is that Cupid decides to enact his revenge. First, after Psyche leaves, she goes off to the city to confront her sister, one of her sisters, and she tells her sister what happened. And the sister decides that she's going to take advantage of this opportunity, that she's going to leave her husband in her home and try to woo Cupid and take the place of Psyche. So she goes up to the mountain, and she, expecting to jump into the arms of the west wind Zephyr and being carried off to the crystal palace, calls Cupid's name, dives off to the mountain, and falls to her death. And then the other sister does the exact same thing. As soon as she finds out the story, finds that Psyche has been banished, she too ascends the mountain, makes her way to the crystal palace, only to jump into the air and have no wind catch her and fall to her death. So, last week we left off, though, was with Aphrodite getting the message from the seagulls, and in a rage, going to her sisters and talking to Ceres and to Juno, right? And being like, I must go and attack this Psyche. I must go and punish my son, you know? And her sisters are like, what are you talking about? Psyche has done nothing but been born beautiful. And Cupid has done nothing but been a young man who fell in love with a girl. Like, no one is hurt. Nothing bad is happening. What is your problem? And that's kind of where we left everything. Aphrodite was pissed off and mad at her sisters for disregarding her concerns, and she took off. So this is where we are going to resume with the story of Cupid and Eros. Or sorry, Cupid and Psyche. All right, here we go. Let me just pop this up. All right. Book 6. The Tale of Cupid and Psyche, Ceres, and Juno. Meanwhile, Psyche wandered day and night, restlessly seeking her husband, eager if she could not mollify his anger with a wife's caresses, at least to appease him with a devotee's prayers. Spying a temple on the summit of a high mountain, she thought, how do I know he might not live there? Swiftly she moved towards it. Though she was wearied from her efforts, hope and desire quickened her step. When she had clambered up to the lofty ridge, she entered the shrine and stood by the sacred couch. It was heaped with ears of wheat, some woven into wreaths, and ears of barley. There were sickles and all the other harvest implements, but scattered about in total disorder, as if left there by the harvesters escaping the summer sun. Psyche sorted them all into separate piles, thinking she should not neglect the temples or rituals of any deity, but rather appeal to the kindness and mercy of them all. It was bountiful Ceres who found her, carefully and diligently caring for her shrine, and called to her from afar, Psyche, poor girl, what's this? Venus, her heart afire, is searching intently for you. She wants to punish you severely, demanding vengeance with all her divine power. Yet here you are, looking after my affairs? How can you think of anything but your own safety? Psyche drenched the goddess's feet with a flood of tears and swept the temple floor with her hair as she prostrated herself on the ground, uttering countless prayers, seeking to win the deity's favor. I beseech you by the fruitful power of your right hand, by the joy-filled ceremony of the harvest, by the unspoken mystery of the sacred basket, by the winged flight of your dragon servants, by the furrowed Sicilian fields and Pluto's chariot and the swallowing earth, by Proserpine's descent into a gloomy wedding, the torchlit discovery of that same daughter of yours and her return, and by all the other secrets which you sanctuary in Attica Eleusis cloaks in silence. Oh, save the life of wretched Psyche, your suppliant. So Proserpine, that is the Roman name for Persephone the Cori, the daughter of Demeter, who was abducted by Hades to wed him in the underworld. All right. Let me hide her for a few days here at least, among your store of grain, till the great goddess's raging anger abates with the passage of time, or until my strength, exhausted by my long journey, is restored by a chance rest. Ceres answered, your tears and prayers move me more than I can say, and I long to help you, but Venus is not simply my niece. We share ancient ties of friendship, and besides, she's so good-hearted. I can't afford to offend her. I fear you must leave the shrine at once, and count yourself fortunate not to be held here as my captive. Driven away despite her hopes, doubly afflicted with sorrow, Psyche retraced her steps. In the valley below, at the center of a dimly lit grove, she caught sight of another beautifully fashioned temple. Not wishing to miss any path, however uncertain, that might lead to better expectations, and happy to seek help from any deity, she approached the sacred doors. There she saw such rich offerings, gold embroidered ribbons attached to the branches and the doorposts, whose lettering spelled the name of the goddess to whom they were dedicated, with thanks for her aid. So Psyche knelt and clasped the altar, still warm from sacrifice, in her arms, and dried her tears and prayed. Sister and consort of mighty Jove, whether you reside in the ancient sanctuary of Samos, which, with granted the sole glory of your birth and infant tears and nurturing, or whether you frequent the lofty site of blessed Carthage, where they worship you as a virgin riding the lion through the sky, or whether you are defending Argos' famous walls behind the banks of the Inachus, where they call you the Thunderer's bride, queen of the gods, you whom east adores as Zygia, goddess of marriage, and the west as Lucina, goddess of childbirth. Be Juno, the protectress, to me in my dire misfortune. I am so weary for my great troubles. Free me from the dangers that threaten, for I know you come willingly to help of pregnant girls in peril. As she bowed in supplication, Juno appeared in all the glorious majesty of her divinity. How I wish, she cried at once, I could match my will to your prayer, but it would bring me shame to go against the wishes of Venus, Vulcan's wife and my daughter-in-law, whom I've always loved as if she were my own. And then the law prevents me from harboring another's fugitive servant without their consent. The tale of Cupid and Psyche brought to account. Terrified at this second shipwreck of her hopes, unable to find her winged husband, Psyche abandoned all thought of salvation and took counsel of her thoughts. What else can I try? What other aid can ease my tribulations, since the goddesses, despite their favorable views, cannot help me? Where else can I turn caught in such a web? What roof can conceal me? What darkness can hide me from the all-penetrating eyes of powerful Venus? Why not pluck up courage, as a man would, and abandon idle hope? Go to your mistress willingly, though late, and by yielding to her furious pursuit, mollify her. Besides, who knows that you may not find the one you've long searched for, there in his mother's house, so ready to risk the unknown consequences of surrender, even destruction itself. She pondered how she could commence her imminent appeal. Meanwhile, Venus, abandoning all attempts to find her on earth, sought the heavens. She ordered her chariot readied, that Vulcan, the goldsmith, had carefully wrought the subtle skill, offering it to her as a gift before they entered into marriage. It was noted for its filigree work, and more valuable for the very gold removed by the refining file. 4 white doves, with glad demeanor, emerged from the dovecote, surrounding her chamber, offered their snowy necks to the jeweled harness, then lifted the burden of their mistress and happily took flight. Sparrows rose in the chariot's wake, chirping madly at its approach, and all the birds that sing so sweetly, great Venus's retinue, filled with song and unafraid of rapacious eagles or circling hawks along the way, echoed their delight with honeyed melodies. Thus the clouds parted, the heavens opened to welcome their daughter, in the highest ether received the goddess with joy. She went straight to Jove's royal citadel and urgently demanded to borrow the services of Mercury, the messenger of the gods. That's Hermes in the Greek. Nor was Jupiter's celestial ascent denied her. In triumph, she descended from the sky with Mercury too in her wake and gave him careful instructions. Arcadian, you know your sister Venus has never accomplished a thing without your presence, and no doubt you're aware I'm trying in vain to find a runaway servant. So nothing remains but for you to publicly proclaim a reward for whoever finds her. Go carry out my order at once and describe her features clearly, so that no one charged with wrongfully hiding her can claim ignorance as a defense. With that, she handed him the details, Psyche's name and the rest, and promptly left for home. Mercury rushed to comply, running here and there from person to person, filling his task with proclamation. If any man knows the whereabouts of, or can attest in flight, the runaway servant of Venus, the princess named Psyche, he should meet with Mercury, author of this announcement, by the shrine of Venus, Murcia, in the Circus Maximus. The reward offered is 7 sweet kisses from Venus herself, and one more deeply honeyed touch of her caressing tongue. After his proclamation, the desire for her so fine a reward roused the competitive instinct in every mortal man, and more than anything, it put an end to Psyche's previous hesitation. Familiarity, a servant of Venus, ran at her as she approached her mistress's door and began shouting at the top of her voice. So, you worthless girl, you've at last remembered you have a mistress, just like your thoughtless behavior to pretend ignorance of all the trouble we've endured searching for you. But now you've fallen into my hands, and a good thing too. Now you're in death's claws indeed, and you'll pay the price for the endless defiance. The tale of Cupid and Psyche, the first task. With that, she seized her tight by the hair and dragged her inside. The unresisting Psyche was thrust into Venus's presence. The goddess burst into savage laughter, as women do when deeply enraged, beating her round the head and dragging her about by the ear, crying, "So you deign to call on your mother-in-law at last, do you? Or are you here to visit that husband of yours, laid low by your own hand? Don't you worry. I'll entertain you as a fine daughter-in-law deserves. Where are those attendants of mine? Anxiety and sorrow." When they entered, she handed the girl over to them for punishment. At the goddess's command, they flogged poor Psyche and tortured her in other ways, then returned her to their mistress's sight. Then Venus screeched with laughter again. "Look at her," she cried, "trying to stir my pity with that offering, that swollen belly of hers. No doubt she thinks its illustrious origin might gladden its grandmother's heart. Indeed, what joy, in the very flower of my youth, to be known as a grandmother, with the offspring of a lowly servant as Venus's own grandson. But how foolish of me to call it such, since this marriage of a mortal and God took place in some country villa, with a nary a witness, without the father's consent. It was not done within the law, and your child too will be illegitimate, if indeed I allow the birth at all." Having launched this tirade, Venus flew at her, beat her about the head severely, tore her hair and ripped her clothes to pieces. Then the goddess called for wheat, millet, and barley, poppy seeds, chickpeas, lentils, and beans, and mixed the heaps all together in one pile. Then she returned to Psyche. "You look such a hideous creature, you only attract a lover by hard work. So I'll test out your industriousness myself. Sort that pile into separate kinds, each in its own heap. Finish it all by this evening and show it to me for approval." With that, Venus took herself off to a marriage feast. Psyche sat there dumbfounded, gazing silently at that confused and inextricable mountain of a task, dismayed by its sheer enormity, but at a passing ant, a little ant of the field, pitied the great god's bride, and seeing the intractable nature of the problem, condemned the goddess's cruelty. Running this way and that, it summoned and gathered together a whole squadron of local ants, crying, "Nimble creatures of earth, the mother of all, take pity on this pretty girl in trouble. Run swiftly now to the aid of the wife of love himself." Wave after wave of 6-footed folk appeared, and with tireless industry took the heap apart piece by piece, and sorting it into different piles, each of a separate nature, then quickly vanished from sight. That's beautiful. The tale of Cupid and Psyche, the second task. Venus returned from the wedding festivities that evening, smelling of balsam and soaked with wine, her whole body garlanded in gleaming roses. When she saw how perfectly the difficult task had been performed, she cried, This is not your doing, you wretch, but the work of that boy who fell in love with you to your misfortune and his. Then she threw Psyche a lump of bread for her supper and went to bed. Cupid was still under close custody, locked in a room deep in the house, partly for fear his injury would be worsened by wanton self-indulgence, partly to keep him from meeting his sweetheart. So, under one roof but separated, the lovers spent a wretched night. But as soon as dawn's chariot mounted the sky, Venus summoned Psyche and gave her a fresh task. Do you see the wood which borders all the bank of the flowing river, where dense thickets overlook the source nearby? Sheep, with fleece that glistens with purest gold, wander there and gaze unguarded. Obtain a hank of that precious wool in any manner you please, and bring it to me straightway. Such is my decree. Psyche left willingly, not to fulfill the goddess's demand, but to escape her troubles by throwing herself from a cliff into the river. But a green reed, that piper of sweet music, stirred by the touch of a gentle breeze, was divinely inspired to prophesy thus. Poor Psyche, though you're assailed by a host of sorrows, don't pollute these sacred waters with a pitiful act of suicide. Conceal yourself carefully behind this tall plane tree that bathes in the same current as I do. Don't go near those dreadful sheep right now, as they soak up heat from the burning sun and burst out in wild fits of madness, venting their fury on passers-by with those sharp horns set in stony foreheads and their venomous bite. But wait till the sun heats fades in late afternoon, when the flock settles to rest under the calming influence of the river breeze. Then, while the savagery is assuaged and their temper eased, just explore the trees in the wood nearby, and you'll find golden wool clinging here and there to the bent branches. Thus, a simple reed, in its kindness, taught Psyche in distress how to save herself. She never faltered, nor had reason to regret obeying the advice so carefully given, but accepted her instructions, and easily filled the folds of her dress with soft gleaming gold, carrying her spoils to Venus. Yet her success at this second dangerous task garnered no favor in her mistress's eyes. Venus frowned and said with a cruel smile, I know the true author of this achievement only too well, but now a serious test will prove if you've real courage and true intelligence. Do you see that steep mountain peak? Rising above the towering cliffs, dark waters flow from a black fount there, down to the nearby valley's confined depths, and they feed the swamps of Styx. That's one of the rivers of the underworld, and the bitter stream of Coctus, another river in the underworld. Draw me some of the freezing liquid from the bubbling heart of that spring, and bring it me quickly in this little phial. With that, she gave a crystal jar and added a few harsh threats for good measure. The tale of Cupid and Psyche, the third task. Psyche, determined now, if she failed to end her wretched life at last, clambered swiftly and steadfastly towards the mountain summit. But when she neared that ridge that was her goal, she saw the vast difficulty of her deadly task. A high and immense rock wall, jagged, precarious, and inaccessible, emitted dread streams from jaws of stone, flowing downwards from the precipitous source through a narrow funnel they had carved and sliding unseen down to the gorge below. On either side, fierce serpents slithered from the holes in the cliffs, extending their heads, eyes given to unblinking vigil, their pupils on watch at every moment. Even the waters were alive and on guard, crying out, Off with you! Where are you going? See here! What are you doing? Beware! Be gone! You'll die! As if charged to stone, though present in body, the helpless Psyche took leave of her senses, and overwhelmed by the threat of inescapable disaster, locked even that last solace of tears. But the sharp eyes of kindly Providence saw an innocent soul in trouble. Mighty Jupiter's royal eagle, wings outstretched, was there to aid her. The raptor recalled that long time ago when at Cupid's command he had served to carry Ganymede, the Phrygian cupbearer, through the heavens to Jove. Now he brought timely assistance, honoring Cupid's claim on him. Seeing the ordeal the god's wife was enduring, he left the bright roads of high heaven and circling above her called, "Simple and innocent as you are, do you really expect even to touch, never mind steal, a single drop from that most sacred and cruel of founts? Jupiter himself and all the gods fear these Stygian waters. Surely you know that. Just as you swear by the power of the gods, so the gods in turn swear by the power of Styx. Now pass me that phial." He snatched it from her hand and swept off to fill it from the stream. Balanced on his great sweeping wings, he flew beyond the serpent's reach. Those savage jaws, those incisors, those triply grooved, flickering tongues, swerving to right and left. The water rose and threatened to harm him if he did not desist, but he gathered them, claiming he sought them at Venus's orders, acting on her behalf, and was granted easier access on that account. The tale of Cupid and Psyche, the underworld. So Psyche regained the little jar, now full, and quickly brought it to Venus. But still the cruel goddess's will was not appeased. Menacing her with greater, more terrible threats, Venus glared at her balefully. "Now I see how readily you've performed these impossible tasks of mine. I'm certain you must be some kind of high and mighty witch. But there's one more little service you must perform, my dear. Take the jar and plunge from the light of day to the underworld, to the dismal abode of Pluto himself. Hand the jar to Proserpine and say, 'Venus asks that you send her a little of your beauty, enough for one brief day. She has used and exhausted all she had while carrying her son who's ill. And don't be slow to return, since I need to apply it before I tend a gathering of deities.'" Oh, wow, that's interesting. It is through the magic of Proserpine, through the quarry, that Venus is beautiful? Wow, interesting. Now Psyche felt that this was indeed the end of everything. The veil had been drawn aside, and she saw she was being driven openly to imminent destruction. Forced was it not obvious to go willingly on her own 2 feet to Tartarus and the shades? Instantly she climbed to the summit of the highest tower, intending to throw herself from it as the swiftest and cleanest route to the underworld, but the turret suddenly burst into speech. "Unhappy girl, why seek to destroy yourself in this way? Why rashly surrender everything before this, the last of your tasks? Once your breath is gone from your body, you'll sink to the depths of Tartarus indeed, but from there you'll not return. Listen to me. Not far from here is the famous city of Achaean Sparta. Seek Cape Taenarus. There in the region, it's remote, that borders on Lacedaemon. There is a breathing hole of Diths, and through its gaping portal, they'll show you a rough-made path." Wow, they're telling her where the cave entrance to the underworld is. "Once cross the threshold and take that road, you'll reach Pluto's palace by the shortest way. But don't go into the shadows without bearing in each hand a barley cake soaked in honeyed wine, and hold 2 coins in your mouth. When you've completed a good part of your gloomy journey, you'll meet with a lame ass carrying wood, an equally lame driver, who'll ask you to hand him some sticks that have fallen from his load. But don't utter a single word, and pass them by in silence. Not long afterwards, you'll reach the river of the dead, where Charon, the ferryman, demands an instant toll, then carries the shades to the further bank in his patched-up skiff. Thus we see that avarice lives even amongst the dead, and Charon, the tax collector for Pluto, that great deity, does nothing without a fee. A pauper who's dying must find the passage money. Unless there's a coin to hand, no one will allow him to expire. Let that squalid old man have one of the coins you bear, but make sure he takes it out of your mouth with his own hand. And when you're crossing that slow-moving stream, an aged corpse afloat on the surface will raise its rotting hands and beg you to lift him into that boat. But don't be swayed by mistaken pity. Once you are across the river and have gone a little further, some old woman weaving at the loom will ask you to lend a hand for a while, but you must not help them either. All these and more are traps laid for you by Venus to make you let go of one of those barley cakes. And don't think losing barley cake is of little consequence. If you lose either cake, you'll not see daylight again, for you'll arrive at a monstrous dog with triple heads of enormous size, a huge and fearsome creature with thunderous jaws, whose barks enough to frighten the dead, but in vain. He can do them no harm. So that's Cerberus, the guardian of the underworld, an avatar of Hecate. He keeps constant guard at the threshold of Proserpine's dark halls, defending the insubstantial palace of Dis. One barley cake thrown as a sop will hold him, and you can get by easily and enter Proserpine's presence. She'll receive you courteously and benignly and try to tempt you to sit down by her in comfort and eat a sumptuous meal. But you must squat on the ground, demand common bread and eat that. Then tell her why you are there. Take what is set before you and make your way back, bribing the savage dog with that second barley cake. Give the avarice ferryman the coin you keep in reserve. Cross the river, retrace your steps, and you'll return to the heavenly choir of stars. But above all else, I warn you, be careful. Whatever you do, not to open and not to look in the jar you tied to your wrist. And don't let your curiosity loose by thinking too much about that hidden treasure. Excuse me 1 second here. Oof. Okay. And don't let your curiosity loose by thinking too much about that hidden treasure, divine beauty. Thus the far-seeing tower performed its prophetic service. Psyche reached Taenarus without delay, and with both coins and cakes, hastened down the path to the underworld. She passed the lame-ass driver in silence, gave up her toll to the ferryman, ignored the cries of the floating corpse, spurned the cunning requests of the weaver woman, fed the dog a cake to assuage his fearful madness, and entered the palace of Proserpine. She accepted neither the pleasant seat nor the luxurious meal her hostess offered, but sat on the ground at her feet, and contenting herself with a simple crust, achieved what Venus had asked. In secret, the jar was quickly filled and sealed, and Psyche gathered it up again. She silenced the barking dog with the ruse of that second cake, paid her last coin to the ferryman, and ran even more swiftly back from the underworld. But despite her haste to be done with her terms of service, once she returned to the brightness of day and greeted it with reverence, her mind was overcome by a most unwise curiosity. Behold, she said to herself, I'm foolish to be the bearer of such divine beauty and not take a tiny drop of it for myself. It might even help me please my beautiful lover. Oh no, you're already the most beautiful woman. Why? Oh gosh. Let's continue. The tale of Cupid and Psyche, the jar of sleep. And with those words she unsealed the jar, but there was never a drop of beauty there, nothing but deathly, truly Stygian sleep. When the cover was lifted, slumber attacked her instantly, enveloping her entire body in a dense cloud of somnolence. She collapsed where she stood, fell on the path, and deep slumber overcame her. She lay there motionless, like a corpse, but fast asleep. Wow. So it was that power of hypnosis and not beauty at all. Cupid, feeling better now that his scar had healed, could no longer endure the absence of his beloved Psyche, and dropped from the high window of the room where he had been confined. With wings restored by his long rest, he flew all the more swiftly, and swooping to Psyche's side, he wiped away the sleep with care and returned it to the jar where it belonged. Then he roused her with a harmless touch of his arrow, saying, Look how you've nearly ruined yourself again. Poor child, with that insatiable curiosity of yours. Now be quick and finish the task mother assigned. I'll take care of everything else. With this he took lightly to his wings, while Psyche, for her part, swiftly carried Proserpine's gift to Venus. Now Cupid, pale of face, devoured by uncontrollable love, was so concerned by his mother's sudden harshness, he returned to his old tricks, quickly flying to heaven's heights on his swift wings, kneeling before great Jove, and attempting to win support for his cause. Jupiter tweaked Cupid's cheek, raised the lad's hand to his lips, kissed it in reply. My dear son, despite the fact you've never shown the slightest respect granted me by all the other deities, but wounded my heart again and again and shamed me with endless bouts of earthly passion, I, who command the elements, I, who adorned the course of the stars, and despite the fact you defy the law, even the Lex Julia itself, and the rules that maintain public order, that you've injured my good name and destroyed my reputation through scandalous adulteries, transforming my tranquil features vilely into snakes and flames, and birds and beasts, and even cattle. Nevertheless, because of my sweet disposition and the fact that you were cradled in my own arms, I'll do as you ask, but only on one condition, that you beware of making me your rival by giving me, in payment for this favor, some other girl of outstanding beauty. he needs a lover. You know, Zeus is forever off chasing tail. All right. The tale of Cupid and Psyche, the marriage. So saying, he ordered Mercury to call an impromptu gathering of the gods, with a fine of 100 pieces of gold for failing to attend the heavenly assembly, which threat guaranteed the celestial theater was filled. Almighty Jupiter, from his throne, gave the following addresses. O deities, inscribed in the roll call of the muses, you all know it to be true that I raised this lad with my own hands. I've decided the impulses of his hot youth need curbing in some manner. We must take away the opportunity, restrain his childish indulgence with the bonds of matrimony. He's found a girl, he's taken her virginity. Let him have her, hold her, and in Psyche's arms indulge his passions forever. Then he turned to Venus, saying, Now, my daughter, don't be despondent. Don't fear for your lineage or status because of his wedding immortal. I'll make it a marriage of equals, legitimate in accordance with civil law. And he ordered Mercury to bring Psyche to heaven at once. Once there, he handed her a cup of ambrosia, saying, Drink this, Psyche, and be immortal. Cupid will never renege on the bond, and the marriage will last forever. Presently, a rich wedding feast appeared. The bridegroom reclined at the head, clasping Psyche in his arms. Jupiter and Juno sat beside them, and all the deities in order. Ganymede, the cupbearing shepherd lad, served Jupiter his nectar, that wine of the gods, and Bacchus Liber served the rest, while Vulcan cooked the meal. Now the Horae adorned everyone with roses and hosts of other flowers. Those are the goddesses of seasons. The Graces scattered balsams. Those are the daughters of Aphrodite, goddesses of joy and blessings. The choir of muses sounded. Apollo sang to the lyre, and Venus danced charmingly to that outpouring of sweet music, arranging the scene so the muses chimed together with the satyr fluting away, and a woodland creature of Pan's piping his reeds. Pan is a friend of Dionysus. He represents that power of the all and that experience of going through the madness and becoming one with nature. And the satyrs, of course, are the ones who wear the goat pants and have those massive erections and engage in the rites of Bacchus. All right. So Psyche was given in marriage to Cupid, according to the rite. And when her term was due, a daughter was born to them, whom we call Pleasure. Oh, wow. The goddess Pleasure. What's the goddess Pleasure's name in Greek? Let's look this up. So, one second here. Greek mythology. Who is Hedon? I should have known. Hedon. Yes, I remember now. The personification of love. as the daughter born from the union of Eros and Psyche. Beautiful. Hedon. Okay, let's continue. An escape attempt. This was the tale the drunken, half-demented old woman told her girl prisoner, while I stood there regretting, by Hercules, that I'd no stylus and pad to record so fine a story. Now the robbers returned, loaded with loot, though after a serious skirmish, and some of them, the more enterprising, were keen, so I heard, to leave the injured there to recover from their wounds, and head back for the rest of the sacks that they'd hidden in a cave. Quickly swallowing a meal, they prodded the horse and I along the road, as their future bearers of goods, beating us with their sticks. At last, towards evening, when we were weary from many a hill and dale, they led us to the cave, burdened us with piles of their pickings, and not even allowing a moment's respite for us to regain our strength, started back again at the trot. They were in haste, and so agitated, the relentless beating and prodding made me tumble over a stone at that edge of the road. I lay there under a hail of blows, till they forced me to rise, though I found it hard with a lame right leg and a bruised left hoof. How long are we going to waste good fodder on this worn-out beast, said one. Now he's lame as well. Yes, another cried. We've had no luck since he came. We've barely made a decent profit. Most of us are wounded, and the bravest lost. As soon as we've unloaded these sacks, he's borne so unwillingly, I say we toss him over the cliff, said a third, as food for the vultures. These kind souls were debating my death. While these kind souls were debating my death, we'd already reached home. Fear turning my hooves to wings, they quickly unloaded the spoils, and with no concern for us, nor for that matter of my execution, they called to the injured friends they'd left behind and returned to fetch the rest of the booty themselves, impatient, as they said, with our tardiness. No small anxiety gripped me as I pondered the threat of death that menaced me. I thought to myself, Lucius, what are you standing here for, awaiting the end of all? Your death, the cruel one at that, has already been agreed by the robbers and hardly requires much effort. Look at the chasm there, with those sharp rocks jutting upward to pierce you before you reach its depths and split your body apart. That marvelous magic spell of yours may have given you an ass's form and its labors to perform, but rather than its thick hide, it wrapped you in a skin that's as thin as a leech's. While then, show a man's courage and try to escape while you can. You've a good opportunity now while the robbers are away. Or are you afraid of that old half-dead hag who keeps an eye on you? Even if you're lame, you could still see her off with a kick of your leg. But where in the world to go? Who'll give you sanctuary? Now there's a stupid, asinine question. What traveler wouldn't be glad to take a means of transport along? So with a sudden sharp tug, I broke the halter by which I was hitched, and set off as fast as I could on all four legs. Yet I still couldn't evade that vigilant old woman's hawk-like eye. Seeing I'd broken loose, she grabbed the rope as I went by, with more alacrity than you'd expect from one of her years and gender, then struggled to pull me about and led me back. But remembering the robber's murderous decree, I kicked at her with my hind legs, without a shred of pity, knocking her to the ground. Still she clung on stubbornly, laying flat on the earth, so that she followed me as I ran, dragged along in pursuit, and she began to scream. What a noise! Begging the help of some stronger arm, though the feeble sounds that formed her cries were useless, since there was only the captive girl about, who flew out on hearing the shouts, and saw before her a scene from a memorable piece of theater, an aged Dirce by Hercules, dragged off by an ass instead of a bull. Now she summoned a man's courage and performed a bold and beautiful feat. She twisted the rope from the old woman's hand, stayed my headlong flight with caressing words, mounted nimbly on my back, and spurred me onward once more. I was driven not just by my desire to escape in the manner I'd chosen, and my zeal to rescue the girl, but persuaded too by her blows that descended from time to time. And so I hit the track with the speed of a racehorse, galloping flat out. I tried to neigh delicate words to her, and pretending to bite my back, turned my neck and kissed her lovely feet. She sighed deeply, then turned her anxious face towards the sky. "O gods above," she cried, "help me now in my desperate plight, and you, crueler fortune, cease your fury at last. I should have atoned enough in your eyes, given all these piteous torments I've endured, and your protector of my life and freedom. If you carry me safely home to my parents and handsome lover, how I'll thank you, honor you, and feed you. First I'll comb out that mane of yours and adorn it with my maiden's gems. Then I'll curl the locks on your brow, part them neatly, and carefully disentangle the hair of your tail all matted and bristly from neglect, glittering with golden amulets, bright as the starry sky. You'll march triumphantly in joyful public procession. I'll stuff you with food every day, my hero, bringing you nuts and sweet dainties in my silk apron, and with delicacies to eat, to perfect leisure and profound happiness, I'll add this glorious honor. I'll enshrine the remembrance of my salvation through divine providence and a painting showing our present flight to be hung in my entrance hall. There people will see it, and when stories are told, they'll hear it, and the clumsy commentaries of the learned will perpetuate the tale, how a princess fled her captors riding on an ass. You'll be featured yourself among the ancient wonders, and given your example, will believe in truth that Phrixus swam the Hellespont on a ram's broad back, that Arion rode a dolphin, and Europa a bull, and if Jupiter really was that bull and bellowed, perhaps this ass I'm on conceals some deity or human. Wow, she's smarter than she thinks. But let's look up some of these characters who you may not know. Phrixus. Who is Phrixus? Let's see this. Phrixus. So, Phrixus, in Greek mythology, Phrixos, standing on end, bristling, was the son of Athamas, king of Boeotia, and Nephele, goddess of the clouds. He was the older brother of Helle, and the father of Argus, Phrontis, Meles, Cetosaurus by Chalciope, daughter of Aeetes, king of Colchis. Oh, wow. Phrixus and Helle. Yeah, that's the story of having to cross the Hellespont. Phrixus and Helle were hated by their stepmother Ino. She hatched a devious plot to get rid of the children, roasting all of Boeotia's crops, seeds, so they would not grow. The local farmers, frightened of famine, asked a nearby oracle for assistance. Ino bribed the men sent to the oracle to lie and to tell the others that the oracle required the sacrifice of Phrixus and Helle. Before they were killed, though, Phrixus and Helle were rescued by a flying or swimming ram with golden wool sent by Nephele, their natural mother. Their starting point is variously recorded as Halos in Thessaly or Orokmenos in Boeotia. During their flight, Helle, for unknown reasons, fell off the ram and drowned in the strait between Europe and Asia, which was named after her, the Hellespont, meaning the Sea of Helle. Oh, wow. Phrixus survived all the way to Colchis, where King Aeetes, the son of the god Helios, took him in and treated him kindly, giving Phrixus his daughter Chalciope in marriage. Wow. That's a beautiful story. Let's hop back over here. We have one more character we want to check out. Arion that rode a dolphin. Who is Arion? Oh my gosh. What are you doing? Okay, stop this. Okay. All right, Arion was a Kitharode in ancient Greek, a Dionysiac poet, credited with inventing the dithyramb. Oh wow, the dithyramb, those are poetry to Dionysus, huge part of the mysteries. The islanders of Lesbos claimed him as their native son, but Arion found a patron in Periander, tyrant of Corinth. Although notable for his musical inventions, Arion is chiefly remembered for the fantastic myth of his kidnapping by pirates and miraculous rescue by dolphins. Yeah, we've definitely, rescue by dolphins is a constant in the Greek, right? We also have I'm thinking the story of Amphryte and Palemon and many others. Beautiful stuff. Wow. Let's go back to our main text here. And we know Europa is the goddess, right, who falls in love with Zeus, who appears as a bull, right? Beautiful. Okay, let's continue. While she was uttering these sentiments, mingling frequent prayers with her sighs, we reached a fork in the road. She seized the halter and tried to steer me to the right, since that must have been the way to her parents' house. But I knew the robbers had gone that way to fetch the rest of their loot, and so I stubbornly resisted and expostulated with her and many in my mind. Unhappy girl, what are you doing? Where are you going? Why hurry to Hades on my hooves? You'll do for us both this way. And there the robbers came upon us, tugging in opposite directions, as if in dispute over land, or rather the right way. They'd seen us from afar in the moonlight, and greeted us with ironical laughter. Recapture. Where are you off to in the night? Cried one. Aren't you afraid of midnight ghosts and wandering spirits? What a good girl, eager to see your parents. Well, we must provide an escort for you, as you're all alone, and show you the short way home. Suiting the action to the word, he grabbed the halter and turned me round, giving me the usual beating with the rough stick he was carrying. Then, hastening unwillingly towards imminent death, I remembered the pain in my leg, nodded my head, and limped. So he cried, "You're staggering and weaving again. Those legs of yours can gallop, but they can't walk. Yet you were flying faster than old winged Pegasus." While he was jeering at me and brandishing his stick, we reached the barricade in front of the cave, and there, dangling from a low branch of tall cypress, was the old woman, a noose round her neck. They cut her down, dragged her away at the end of the rope, and threw her over the cliff. Then they swiftly chained the girl, and like ravening beasts, attacked the meal left for them, posthumously by that diligent and unfortunate old crone. While they bolted their food with voracious greed, they began to discuss our punishment and the vengeance they'd take on us. As might be expected of such a turbulent crew, various suggestions were uttered that the girl should be burned alive, thrown to wild beasts, crucified or torn to pieces on the rack, though they all agreed that whatever happened, she certainly had to die. Then one of them calmed the uproar, and quietly delivered the following address. The traditions of our guild, our temperance, my own sense of moderation, do not condone indulging our anger beyond all bounds. By invoking wild beasts, crucifixion, flame, or rack, those speedy exits by sudden death, take my advice and grant the girl her life, but only the sort of brief existence she deserves. Remember your earlier decree regarding that ass of ours, forever idle, but a consummate glutton. Now a counterfeiter of sham lameness, who aided and abetted the girl's attempt to escape. Vote to slit his throat at dawn and gut him then. Strip the girl, and since he preferred her company to ours, sew her inside his belly, and with her head sticking out, but the rest of her imprisoned in his beastly hide. Then set that stuffed ass down on top of a crag, and let the power of the burning sun hold sway. Then both will suffer the punishments you've rightly chosen. The ass will die as he long deserved, while the girl will suffer the countless bites of insects that eat the flesh, and the roasting flies when the fierce heat of the sun burns the ass's belly, and the pains of crucifixion when dogs and vultures pick at her guts. And think of all her other torments and suffering too inside a dead animal while still alive, her nostrils scorched by terrible stench, and slowly wasting away and starving to death, not even her hands free to achieve her own demise. As he finished, the bandits wholeheartedly stamped their feet and roared their assent, all ears as I was. What else could I do but mourn for the corpse I'd be on the morrow? Oh, wow. So that ends book 6. Holy, poor Apuleius and our young girl. They're about to be murdered in one of the most brutal ways I've ever heard described. My God. And they'll probably try and rape her too. It's getting wild, guys. It's getting truly wild. This was a really good chapter. I really enjoyed finishing the story of Psyche and Cupid, and I can't wait to see how Apuleius and this poor young girl survive, because we know they're going to, and I can't wait to see it. So thank you guys so much for joining me. This has been so much fun. I'm really loving this book, and I hope you all come back for part 7. Peace and love. Take care.